Well, Harry famously called his book Spare, and it was several hundred pages dripping with resentment that he'd been the spare to Prince William over the years. Even had some extraordinary detail, like the fact that he had a smaller bedroom when he was a child. Incredibly sort of petty things that he'd obviously had resentment about for many, many decades. And I think Meghan brought a lot of that out of him, and he went into therapy and he dealt with a lot of these issues. But now it seems he seems a bit overshadowed by Meghan herself. And we've seen on recent trips to Colombia and Nigeria where she very much looks like the dominant partner. You can tell that she's the one who's very much in charge, and people are sort of flocking to see her and not him. And now it seems that he's regarding himself as a bit of a spare to her. So it does make you wonder, is he ever going to be happy? Because, he's clearly not happy with that role. He clearly wasn't happy with his role in the royal family. So you do have to ask yourself, what is going to make him happy? Meghan was a successful actress, but she wasn't an A-lister. She feels much more comfortable in Hollywood. She feels more comfortable in California, moving and shaking with Hollywood stars and with various influencers and social influence, social media people. So she feels at home there. He looks like a spare, as we said earlier. He looks like he doesn't quite know what to say or what to do. Probably a completely different sense of humour that the Americans have in many situations. I always feel he's probably missing a few mates that he can go and have a beer with and sort of chill out and have a bit of a gossip or perhaps a bit of a moan about his wife behind her back. I don't know, but I don't feel he has that sort of escape valve. So he does look very stiff sometimes. He does look very unhappy. He does look nervous sometimes in her presence when they're out and about on these recent tours. He makes an effort and tries to look like he's interested in some of these things, and he's sort of still a quasi royal. But of course, he hasn't got the pulling power and the status that he once had, and he may well have realised that a bit too late that the only thing he had going for him in many ways was the fact that he was a member of the royal family. He's not really particularly talented at anything else, and his Invictus Games has been a great success, and he was brilliant in the army. But now he hasn't got that, so he's only got the games every couple of years, and that's the one thing that I think has been a big success for him. Very good question to know whether or not Harry has reached out to his old friends without telling Meghan. I think that she possibly liked him to be isolated from his old friends. I don't think she was particularly popular with some of his old friends when some of them warned Harry against marrying her and thought he was rushing into things, a bit like Prince William did, which was the sort of original cause of the rift between them. So I think that if she had her way, she probably would have kept him away from some of his old friends. So maybe he did contact them in secret. Might well have done. And now that she's obviously found out because it's been in the press, that might not go down very well. But listen, there's all sorts of rumours about the state of their marriage. I don't know what the truth is. There's no evidence at the moment that they're about to split up, but it wouldn't surprise me either way. But I think all the time that they are together, they're going to struggle to make a living from projects. Some of the projects have fallen by the wayside. Some people have already got rid of them, so it's going to be a problem for them. I think for the first year or two, Harry was sort of swept away. He was carried away. It was almost like a sort of therapy for him to do the opera interview, to do the Netflix show, to bring out Spare, get it all off his chest. And it was very much a question of things that resentment that he'd had about the death of his mother, resentment about the fact that he was the spare and not the heir. All of these things, he got it off his chest, and he was sort of carried away with it. And I think that Meghan encouraged him to do that. And of course, a major byproduct of that was they made a lot of money. Now, the money's dried up. Some of their deals have dried up. I think he's probably looked around and suddenly realised what he's done. I'm sure there are moments in the middle of the night where he thinks to himself, what have I actually done? He's cut himself off from his own family. He's cut himself off from a lot of his old friends over here, many of whom, with whom he's now unpopular with them as well. So it's going to be difficult to get back in them with them. Have been suggestions he's been sounding out some of his old friends over the weekend. That was one of the reports, that he's been contacting old friends who he hasn't spoken to for a long time. Some of them will be sympathetic, some of them, I'm afraid, won't be, and will support William and feel that he's let down the country and let down the royal family. So, whichever way you look at it, I think he's taken it so far that it is going to be extremely difficult to come back. There will be baby steps. He might be able to come back in time, and I'm sure that eventually the king would like a resolution to this problem, because he'd like to see his grandchildren, apart from anything else, who he's hardly ever met. They're growing up, Archie and Lilibet, on the West Coast with American accents in a very different culture. And I think when they get a bit older, they're going to start asking questions and saying, why is it that we never see never see our relatives. So it's a very complicated situation, and the problems run very deep. But at the moment, I just don't see any improvement. Well, Harry was very popular because he was very natural. When he was younger, he was very very good with people. When he met them, he put them at their ease. He got down to their level a bit like his mother did. You know, he'd kneel down and he'd pick up babies and he'd pick up children. And he's very very good with children. He was on. He always said himself that he was very good with children because he was on the same sort of still childish himself. And so I think that was one of his great sort of assets, and that's why people liked him. He was the sort of person who people said in all the polls that if they had a member of the royal family, they'd like to go and have a beer with, or like to go out for a meal with. It was Harry because he was fairly natural, and they felt that he was more one of them. I mean, he was never particularly brainy, he was never particularly cerebral. He didn't excel at school at Eton. He didn't go to university. So he wasn't a sort of brain box, but he was just a very natural, good person with people, and that was his biggest asset. When he's out and about with Meghan, you always think that she's maybe putting on an act because she is an actress, whereas his best bet is just to be himself. But at the moment, he doesn't look happy enough to be himself. It's just extraordinary that his the wife that he finally found that he thought was going to make him happy has made him happy in some ways, but has also caused him a lot of problems. And I think Meghan's a very, very strong character, a very dominant character, and she's to some extent manipulated him. And I'm afraid he's gone along with it. Sum up the problem in one word: money. That's the problem. They need the money. They need the money for security. They'll need the money soon for school fees. It's not cheap living in California. And so all the time that they need the money, this is where they're getting involved in projects which, if you were a PR advisor, you'd probably tell them not to do that. But they need the income to come in. So that is the big problem with them. They've sacked or gone their separate ways from several PR people in recent months. That's one suggestion, that Harry's not getting on with the PR people. He's not taking their advice, or he's not accepting their advice. So that is a problem for them, and that might be one reason why he's kind of reaching out to or making sort of overtures, olive branches, if you like, to old friends and people in the UK to see if he can somehow get back here. But as I said earlier, he can't be half in and half out the royal family. He can't commercialise being a royal, and I just don't see that working. So I'm afraid they've sort of made their bed, and to some extent they've got to lie in it. Whether they're going to be able to find lucrative ways of making money that don't involve slagging off the royal family is only time will tell. I think Harry was probably happiest in his royal duties when he was involved with the military. I mean, certainly the 10 years that he was in the armed forces, I always think when he was posted to Afghanistan and when he was actually with other colleagues in the army, I think that was his happiest period because to some extent he was out of the public eye, but it's something that he could identify with, something he'd always wanted to do. He'd always wanted to be a soldier from a very young age. And that when he was most happy. And unfortunately, of course, when he fled to California with Meghan and stopped his royal duties, he was stripped of all his connection to the military. And I think that must have been a massive blow for him. He somehow thought that he could keep in with a lot of his duties and a lot of his titles, but that wasn't possible. The late Queen made it very clear to him that he couldn't be half in and half out. And that's why I don't think these latest stories will work of him suggesting he might want to come back to do some royal duties to some minor ones and start at the bottom again. It's just not going to work. You can't be half in and half out, and you can't be making money in California and then coming back and being a royal. So it's a difficult one for him, but he's got to make a choice. I think there are many problems. First of all, I don't think Meghan wants to ever come back to this country again. I think she knows how unpopular she is. I think, to be honest, if she was out and about, she'd probably get some abuse from some people, and I think she probably knows that. So there's no way that she would want to come back. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that, as I said earlier, he can't be half in and half out. And the third problem is that even if the king forgives him and wants to have a reconciliation, at the moment, I just don't see his brother Prince William forgiving him. And there's even been reports that he wouldn't want Harry to come to his coronation when that time comes. And obviously, we hope that's going to be some time away. But so there are many hurdles to overcome. And I just don't see him coming back. I don't see it working. I don't think they've spoken for a couple of years. By all accounts, they were in the same room. They were even in the same room for a reception afterwards, but they didn't speak. It was very much a case of Harry wanting to come back and pay tribute to his uncle, Lord Fellows, who he was very fond of. And he will come back for these family occasions. But I'm afraid that if anything tells you how bad the rift is between William and Harry, it's the fact that they were in the same room and didn't even talk to each other. So it really is a very deep rift. and I just don't see it healing at all in the near future, if ever, to be honest. I think it's quite likely that William will never forgive him, particularly for the things he said in his book and on the Netflix and program and on the Opera interview about his wife Kate. And of course, at the time when Kate is, as we know, suffering from cancer and undergoing cancer treatment, it couldn't have been at a worse time. And I just don't think he's ever going to forgive him for that. Harry made a sort of grovelling apology, a public apology. I think obviously that would go some way to healing it, but I don't think. I think people are divided. To be honest, I think most people in this country certainly support William. They can understand his feelings. I mean, most people have been involved in some sort of family bust up themselves, and they can understand when things are said that are extremely hurtful. It runs very deep. But I think sadly, Harry, who used to be one of the most popular members of the royal family, is now extremely unpopular. All the polls show that he's hovering just above Prince Andrew. And even if he wanted to come back, and even if he did issue some sort of public apology, I just don't think the public want to accept him back anymore. And they certainly don't want to accept them back as a couple. I think some of them blame Meghan for very much taking him away from them and turning his head and filling him with some of these ideas that have proved to be so destructive. So I just think it's gone so far that it's going to be extremely difficult for him to recover it. And you can have as many PR people as you want, but the public have sort of made up their mind to some extent, and I just don't think they're willing to forgive at the moment.